I've spent years busting my back, making sure my family was taken care of. But when it came to Thanksgiving, my sister kicked me out just because of my job. I'm an AC tech after all. Turns out, that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part? I was actually her boss. Yeah, you heard that right. But let me back up and tell you how everything went down. Hi, I'm Ella. For years, I've been the one everyone in my family leaned on. But this Thanksgiving, everything changed, and it was time for me to finally put myself first. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way, I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. The day had been long, grueling really. Ella wiped the grease from her hands, the smell of motor oil still hanging in the air of her HVAC shop. It was a small business, the kind that kept her busy, but never let her forget how hard she worked just to make ends meet. But today, as she locked up for the night, she felt a strange sense of relief. Thanksgiving was just around the corner, and for the first time in weeks, she could finally enjoy a break from the usual rush of calls and repairs. The evening air was sharp, the kind that nipped at your skin, typical of Seattle's fall weather. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, feeling the chill creep in as the muted cityscape stretched out before her. The gray sky seemed to mirror her mood, that quiet, overcast weight that had been following her for months. There was a longing inside of her, but Ella couldn't place it. The exhaustion was there, too, a heavy blanket that made her bones ache. Still, she was looking forward to Thanksgiving. Family, warmth, food, all the things she used to be able to count on. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, cutting through her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was her mom, Margot. "Hi, Mom," Ella answered, her voice bright, trying to mask the fatigue from her long day. "Hey, honey, I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving." Margot's voice came through, sounding a bit off. It wasn't the usual pre-holiday cheer that Ella was used to. Ella stopped walking and leaned against the side of her truck, her stomach tightening. "Sure, what's up?" "Well," Margot's voice faltered, just enough to make Ella pause. "Caitlin, she's requested that you don't come to Thanksgiving dinner this year." Ella's heart stopped. It felt as if the breath had been knocked out of her lungs. The phone in her hand suddenly felt heavy, like it was burning her skin. She blinked, trying to make sense of what her mother had just said. "What?" The word slipped from her lips before she could stop it. "I know this is a lot to take in," Margot continued, her tone softer now, as if she was trying to cushion the blow. "But Caitlin's boyfriend's parents are coming, and she just thought it would be better if we kept it smaller, just close family." Ella podía escuchar las palabras, pero no hacían sentido. Her sister, her own sister, was choosing to have her boyfriend's family over instead of her. The exclusion stung more than Ella wanted to admit. She'd been an afterthought before, but this felt different. This felt intentional. The hurt was so raw it tasted bitter on her tongue. "Wait," Ella managed to say, her voice shaking now. "I'm family, Mom." "I know, sweetheart," Margot rushed to say, "but Caitlin doesn't want her boyfriend's family to feel uncomfortable and—" Ella interrupted, her voice growing tight with a mixture of disbelief and rising anger. "I've been part of this family my whole life, Mom. I've been there for every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, and now I'm not good enough to sit at the table?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and Ella could practically hear Margot's mind working, scrambling for the right words to make things right. But nothing would make it right. Nothing would undo the hurt that was now spilling over her heart, flooding her chest with a coldness she didn't know how to shake. "It's just this one dinner, Ella," Margot finally said, her voice cracking as if she were trying to convince herself. "Please understand. It's just one dinner." Ella clenched the phone in her hand, the tightness in her chest becoming unbearable. Her fingers trembled as she fought to hold it together. She could feel the tears starting to well up in her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not over this. Not over Caitlin. "Fine," Ella said, her voice a little too calm. "I get it. I'm not part of the family anymore." There was another long pause. Margot was silent, the weight of her words lingering between them. Ella could feel it, the finality in her mother's voice. It was the moment when everything she'd been ignoring came crashing down. She'd been discarded, forgotten. It wasn't just this dinner. It was everything. All the years of support, of sacrifices, of showing up for a family that only ever took and never gave back. It was all for nothing. "I'll talk to you later, Mom," Ella whispered, her voice barely audible. "Ella." Margot's voice was small now, desperate even. But Ella hung up before her mother could say anything else. She stood there, holding the phone in her hand, feeling like she might collapse right where she stood. For a moment, the world felt eerily still. She didn't know what to do next. She didn't know how to make sense of the gaping hole that had just opened inside of her. The phone buzzed again, another text. Ella glanced at the screen. It was from Genevieve, her cousin. "Hey, Ella," the message began. "I overheard something today. Caitlin didn't want you at Thanksgiving because of your job. She said she didn't want her boyfriend's family to think we come from a working-class background. I'm so sorry." The words hit her like a ton of bricks. She read the text over and over. Each time it felt more real, more painful. Her sister had been ashamed of her, ashamed of the very thing that made Ella who she was. Ella slid down the side of her truck, the coldness of the concrete seeping through her jeans. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold on to something, anything, but there was nothing left. She had spent years convincing herself that her family loved her, that the sacrifices she made were enough. But now, in the silence of the evening, the truth was undeniable. Ella had been cast aside, nothing more than a shadow in a life she thought was hers. Her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't even look at it. She didn't need to. She already knew what came next. The world felt quieter now, and yet Ella could hear everything. The aching weight of her loneliness, the unbearable truth that had just been revealed, and the long road ahead, one where she would finally have to face the reality of what her family had become. And she would do it alone. Ella sat alone in the dimly lit corner of the diner, the quiet hum of the few patrons around her only amplifying the isolation she felt. The warmth of the place stood in stark contrast to the cold, empty feeling gnawing at her chest. It was Thanksgiving, and for the first time in years, she was spending it completely alone. The deep-fried turkey, the cranberry sauce, the mashed potatoes she could almost taste from memory, all the things that had once filled her heart with comfort, now seemed like cruel reminders of what she'd lost. She picked at her coffee, swirling the spoon around idly, watching the dark liquid mix with the cream. She had planned on being with her family, of course, but now that plan was as distant as the Seattle skyline outside. She reached for her phone with a sigh, a half-hearted attempt to distract herself. Scrolling aimlessly through social media, Ella could almost feel the weight of every image she came across. There, Caitlin was, smiling in a sleek dress, her arm linked with Dorian's, her boyfriend. They were surrounded by his polished family, laughing and enjoying their perfect Thanksgiving dinner. The picture seemed to burn itself into Ella's mind, the smiling faces so vivid against her own loneliness. Her stomach twisted, and she couldn't help but click on the next photo. There was Caitlin again, her posture stiff, but with a look of forced happiness that sent a pang of pain through Ella. The more she scrolled, the more the weight of the exclusion pressed down on her. It wasn't just this one dinner. It was every time Caitlin had distanced herself from Ella over the years, every time her sister had pretended not to know her, every time she had been the silent supporter while Caitlin thrived. Ella clenched her fists around her phone, her nails biting into her palms. The resentment, once buried under the surface, now surged to the forefront. How many times had she gone above and beyond for Caitlin? How many late-night jobs had she taken to cover Caitlin's tuition, making sure her younger sister never had to worry about money, only to be ignored at family gatherings like she was some kind of afterthought? The weight of all that sacrifice, all that love, felt unbearable now. Caitlin had never once acknowledged it, and now it was clear. She didn't want to. Ella's breath quickened as the decision made itself. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't keep giving everything to someone who never appreciated her. The thought stung, but it also felt like a kind of clarity, the kind that came with finally seeing the truth for what it was. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, and for a moment Ella just stared at Caitlin's social media post. But then, with a deep breath, she unlocked her laptop. The soft click of the keys filled the silence, and she opened the university's payment portal. There it was, her name listed as Caitlin's payer. The tuition, the rent, the textbooks, all paid by Ella without a second thought. But now, she had a second thought, her eyes fixed on the button, Remove Payer. It seemed so simple, so small, yet it felt like the weight of 1,000 pounds pressing down on her chest. Ella's fingers trembled as she clicked it, and a pop-up message appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this account as a payer? This action cannot be undone. Ella cerró los ojos por un momento, tratando de estabilizar su respiración. When she opened them again, she clicked, Yes. The finality of it settled over her like a weight being lifted. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming something. Her power, her dignity, her peace. She had been enough. She had always been enough, and it was time to stop pretending she wasn't. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a call from Margot. Ella hesitated for a moment, her heart still heavy, before answering. Hello, Mom, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, but there was a coldness to it now that hadn't been there before. Ella. Margot's voice was frantic. What are you doing? Caitlin just called me, hysterical. She said you stopped paying for her tuition. Why would you do that? Ella sat back in her chair, her fingers gripping the edge of the table, the weight of her decision still settling into her bones. I'm done, Mom. There was a long pause, and then Margot's voice came through, more desperate than before. What do you mean you're done? You promised you'd support her through school. You can't just leave her like this. She's your sister. Yeah, well, Ella said, her voice firm now, more resolute than she had ever been. She's been my sister for years, but I've been nothing more than her safety net. Every time she needed something, I was there. But when I needed something, just a little respect, she couldn't even give me that, so I'm done. But she needs you, Ella. She's just a kid, Margot protested, but Ella wasn't having it anymore. She's 24, Mom. She's old enough to figure it out on her own. But no, Ella cut her off, her tone colder now. I'm done cleaning up her mess. I'm done being the one who gets treated like crap while everyone else gets what they want. Margot fell silent on the other end of the line, the silence stretching on for far too long. Ella could almost hear the thoughts running through her mother's mind, but she didn't care anymore. She had made her choice, and that was the end of it. I'll talk to you later, Mom, Ella said, her voice as firm as stone. And without waiting for a response, she hung up. She sat there in the diner, her hands shaking slightly as she put the phone down on the table. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, but there was something else there, too. Relief. For the first time in years, Ella felt like she was finally choosing herself. The phone buzzed one more time, but Ella didn't look at it. She had done what needed to be done. And now, for the first time in a long time, she could start moving forward. Ella's quiet morning was interrupted by the sharp buzz of her phone. She glanced at the screen, already knowing who it was before she even saw the name. Caitlin. The text message preview showed a string of angry words. Her stomach twisted slightly, but Ella took a deep breath, grounding herself. The hardest decision she'd ever made had already been made. There was no turning back now. She answered the call, her voice steady, despite the rush of emotions that had followed her all week. Hi, Caitlin, she said, keeping her tone even. Ella, why the hell didn't the tuition payment go through? Caitlin's voice was frantic, sharp. What did you do? This is your mistake. You have to fix it. Ella leaned back in her chair, the soft hum of the office's air conditioning, the only sound in the room besides her sister's raised voice. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the desk, but the warmth from the sun didn't reach her heart. It felt cold in her chest, the remnants of the decision she'd made still echoing in her mind. "I didn't make a mistake, Caitlin," Ella said calmly. "I removed myself as the payer." "What? What do you mean, removed yourself?" Caitlin screamed. "You can't just stop paying for me. I'm in school, Ella. You promised. This is your responsibility. You can't do this to me." Ella cerró los ojos por un momento, exhalando lentamente mientras se preparaba para lo que vino a continuación. Caitlin had never once thought about her sacrifices. Not once. Now, all that Ella's years of hard work had built, Caitlin's education, her comfortable life, was slipping away. "You're right, I did promise, but I promised to help you, not to be treated like crap," Ella said, her voice unwavering. She could feel the weight of the words as they left her lips, and in that moment she realized just how much she had been holding back all these years. "I can't keep supporting someone who treats me like I'm invisible." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Caitlin's voice came through cold and sharp. "So that's it? You're just done with me? After everything I've done for you? After everything I've been through?" Her voice cracked, but it was more from anger than sadness. "Caitlin," Ella said, her voice firm, "this isn't about what you've been through. It's about what I have been through. I've spent years being your backup, your safety net, and you've never once treated me like I mattered. So no, I'm not going to keep paying for you anymore. Not after everything." Ella could hear Caitlin's breathing grow louder, her anger bubbling up. "You don't get it, do you? You're my sister. You're supposed to be there for me, and now you're just going to throw all that away?" "I'm not throwing anything away," Ella replied, "but you're the one who's been throwing me away. You've been embarrassed of me for years, Caitlin. I've watched you push me aside, act like I'm not part of your life. I'm just done being the one who's always there when you need something and ignored when you don't." There was another long silence. Ella could hear Caitlin trying to gather herself, but her breathing was erratic, a sure sign of the desperation and fear that was slowly creeping into her voice. "I can't believe this," Caitlin finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't ask you to stop paying for me. I didn't ask for this." "No," Ella answered, her words calm but resolute. "You never had to ask. I did it because I thought it was what family does, but you never appreciated it, and I can't keep doing this anymore." Caitlin's voice broke, the facade of strength slipping away. "Please, Ella, I need you. You're my sister. You can't just—" Ella's heart tightened, but she didn't give in. "I'm sorry, but this is where I draw the line." The phone clicked as Caitlin hung up, and for a brief moment, Ella just stared at her phone. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she steadied herself. She had made the right decision. She couldn't be the person everyone leaned on anymore, not if it meant losing herself in the process. The silence in the office was deafening, but it didn't feel as suffocating as it had before. Ella sat there for a long moment, reflecting on everything that had led her to this point. She had spent so many years allowing her family to take from her, always giving, always sacrificing, but it had never been enough for them. They had never seen her. Now she was finally choosing herself. But then, her phone buzzed again. Ella looked at the screen. It was a message from Dorian. She stared at the message for a moment before opening it. "Caitlin came to see me. Ella frunció el ceño mientras leía el resto. She's a mess. Wants me to fix this, but I'm not sure how much longer I can stand by her after this. She's been lying to me, Ella." Ella's chest tightened. The last part of the message was like a cold slap. Caitlin had lied to Dorian, too. She had been playing the same game on him. A few moments later, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Dorian's name flashed across the screen. Ella hesitated for a second before answering. "Dorian?" "Ella," Dorian said, his voice strained, but there was a clarity in it now, a calmness that hadn't been there before. I don't know what Caitlin has been telling you, but I'm done with the lies. I can't keep standing by her. She's lied to me for months, Ella. She's been pretending to be something she's not, and I can't keep ignoring that." Ella's heart skipped a beat. "You don't have to fix this, Dorian," she said softly. "She's the one who needs to fix herself." "I know," he replied, and there was a long pause before he spoke again, quieter this time. I'm really disappointed in her, Ella. I need some time to think. I'll talk to you soon." The line went dead, and Ella was left staring at her phone, the weight of everything settling over her like a heavy blanket. Caitlin had lost more than just her tuition payments. She had lost the trust of everyone around her, including Dorian. Caitlin's world was crumbling, and Ella finally realized that for once, she wasn't the one to blame. This was all on Caitlin. The phone buzzed once more, but Ella didn't check it. She stood up, walking toward the window, looking out over the city that seemed to stretch on forever, just like the road ahead of her. She had let go of the past, and now she was moving forward. Caitlin paced outside Dorian's apartment, her heart racing with every step. The sharpness of the evening air cut through her thin jacket, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the crushing weight of the situation, the realization that her world was falling apart. She had never imagined that things could go so wrong, that the lies she'd told for so long would unravel so quickly. But now, standing in front of Dorian's door, she knew there was no turning back. She knocked gently at first, the sound almost lost in the quiet hallway. When no answer came, she knocked again, harder this time, her hands trembling. She had to fix this. She had to make him understand. Dorian had always been there for her, had always made her feel like she wasn't alone. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but the truth was creeping in, gnawing at her from all sides. She had to talk to him. She had to explain. Finally, the door swung open, and there he stood, Dorian. His expression was unreadable, a slight furrow in his brow, his posture rigid. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was just distant. And that distance felt like a chasm to Caitlin. "Hey," she said, her voice catching slightly as she stepped over the threshold. "Can we talk?" Dorian didn't step aside. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on her, his eyes cool, detached. "Come in," he said, his voice flat. He turned and walked toward the living room, and Caitlin followed, trying to hide the nervous tremble in her hands. She sat down on the couch, smoothing out her dress as she took a deep breath. "Look, Dorian," she started, her voice sounding more confident than she felt. "I know you're upset. I know things have been weird lately. But you have to understand, this isn't how I wanted it to go." Dorian didn't respond immediately. He just stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. Caitlin couldn't see his face, but she knew he was thinking, calculating. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "I never meant for it to come to this," she continued, her voice a little more desperate now. I wanted to keep things normal, you know? I didn't want anyone to think I was struggling. I didn't want you to think less of me." Dorian turned to face her then, his expression sharp. "You think I'd think less of you for struggling?" His voice was cold now, his words cutting through the air. "No, Caitlin. I think you're lying to me. I think you've been lying to me about more than just that." Caitlin's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't," he said quietly. "I called the university." His voice was low, steady, but there was an edge to it now. "I found out the truth. Ella's been paying for your tuition this whole time, hasn't she?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her breath caught in her throat as her mind spun. She had been so careful, so meticulous in hiding the truth. But now, standing before Dorian, it was all coming out. All of it. I didn't want you to know, she said weakly, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for some kind of escape. I didn't want anyone to know. It was embarrassing. Dorian's gaze hardened, the disappointment in his eyes almost unbearable. Embarrassing? Embarrassing for you to accept help from your sister? He stepped closer to her, his voice rising now. Or is it embarrassing because you've been hiding the truth, manipulating me, pretending like you've got everything together when you haven't? Caitlin, you're not the person I thought you were. Caitlin's chest tightened. She tried to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. She had always been so careful with her image, so calculated in the way she presented herself to Dorian. And now, it was all falling apart. She had used him, just like she had used Ella, and he was seeing through her facade. He wasn't the naive boyfriend she had played him to be. He was smarter than that. I didn't mean to, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it on my own. Dorian's jaw tightened. You think I'm going to be impressed by your lies? You think you can manipulate me with your charm and excuses? I'm done, Caitlin. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. Caitlin felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. She couldn't lose him. She couldn't lose Dorian, not after everything. Please, Dorian, she begged, her voice desperate. Please don't walk away from me. I can fix this. I can make it right. But Dorian just shook his head, his expression unreadable. No, Caitlin, you can't fix this. The damage is done. I can't keep being part of your game. He turned toward the door, his hand resting on the handle as if preparing to leave. Dorian, no. Caitlin's voice was a broken whisper now. She stood up, her heart racing. Please, don't leave me. Please, don't go. He hesitated for a moment, then looked back at her. His face was hard, the disappointment clear in his eyes. I need some time, he said quietly, before opening the door and stepping out. The sound of the door closing behind him was like the final nail in the coffin. Caitlin stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of her actions crushing her from every angle. She sank back onto the couch, her face in her hands as the tears began to fall. She had lost Dorian. She had lost Ella. She had lost everything. And for the first time, Caitlin truly understood the consequences of her actions. Ella leaned back in her armchair, the soft hum of the city outside her apartment creating a strange kind of calm. The faint light from the street lamp outside filtered in through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. It had been a long day, and she finally had the quiet she craved. She'd spent the past week trying to adjust to her new life, one where she didn't constantly worry about her sister's expectations or her family's manipulation. But as she sipped her tea and let the warmth settle in her chest, her phone buzzed on the table, breaking the stillness. Margot's name flashed on the screen. Ella sighed, her fingers hovering over the phone. She wasn't sure what to expect anymore, but deep down, she knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. She had already made her decision, but she still couldn't escape the sinking feeling that no matter how hard she tried, her family's expectations would always follow her like a shadow. She picked up the phone and answered, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Hey, Mom. You're really doing this, aren't you?" Margot's voice was sharp, laced with anger. Ella could hear the disappointment, the hurt, and the frustration all bundled up in that single question. Cutting Caitlin off? Is that how you repay your family, after everything we've done for you? Ella cerró los ojos tomando un profundo suspiro. She wasn't going to let her mother manipulate her again, not this time, not after everything. "I'm not cutting Caitlin off, Mom," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm simply choosing to stop being the one who takes care of everything while no one ever shows up for me." Margot's voice rose. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away? I raised you better than that. You don't just abandon family when things get tough." Ella's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay composed. "No, Mom, I didn't abandon her. I stopped enabling her. She's an adult and she needs to face the consequences of her actions." Margot scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, so now you're the one who gets to decide what consequences are right for Caitlin? She's your sister, Ella. She needs you. We all do. But I guess that doesn't matter to you." Ella's stomach churned. She had heard this all before. The guilt trips, the accusations, the expectation that she would always put herself last. It was exhausting. And yet, every time, a small part of her always second-guessed her decision. This time, though, she couldn't allow herself to fall into that trap again. "I don't owe her anything," Ella said, the words coming out stronger than she had expected. "I've given her everything, and I've been treated like I don't matter. No more. It's time for me to start living for me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Margot's heavy breathing filled the silence before she spoke again, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's your sister, Ella. Family is supposed to help each other, no matter what." Ella felt the familiar pang of guilt, the same one she'd felt every time she had let her mother twist the knife. But this time, she wasn't going to let it break her. She wasn't going to let her mother's words shake her confidence in the decision she had made. "No, Mom," Ella replied, her voice steady. "Family doesn't take each other for granted. Family doesn't use each other until it's convenient. I've been there for Caitlin for years, and she's never once shown me the same respect." "But you can't just walk away from her like this." Margot's voice cracked, and Ella could hear the hurt bleeding through. "She needs you, Ella. You've always been the one who takes care of everything. You're the one who makes things work. Don't you want to help her anymore? Don't you care?" Ella's hands tightened around the phone, her fingers pressing against the screen as if she could somehow squeeze the anger and frustration out of her body. She was so tired of this, tired of being the one who always had to give, always had to sacrifice. The years of being her family's emotional crutch weighed heavily on her shoulders, but not anymore. "I'm done being the one who's always expected to fix things," Ella said, her voice low and resolute. "I've spent too many years putting everyone else first. I've lost myself in the process. I can't keep doing it, Mom. Not anymore." "Then you're making a mistake," Margot said, her voice cold, almost final. "You'll regret this, Ella. I'm telling you, you'll regret it." Ella felt the sting of her mother's words, but this time, it didn't hurt the way it used to. Instead, it was like a weight lifting off her shoulders. She wasn't the one making the mistake. It was her family that had been blind to her pain for far too long. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom," Ella said softly, "but this is what's best for me, and I need to do this. For me." Another silence stretched between them, and this time it was longer. Ella waited for her mother to say something else, to beg her to change her mind, but Margot didn't. Instead, there was just the sound of her steady breathing, each exhale a reminder of the deep disappointment that hung in the air. Finally, Margot spoke again, her voice colder now. "You're making a huge mistake, Ella. I hope you're ready to live with it." Ella tragó el bulto en su garganta y cerró los ojos. "I'm ready." Without another word, she ended the call. For a long time, Ella sat in her apartment, the silence wrapping around her like a blanket. The phone still felt warm in her hand, but her heart was colder than it had ever been. She had known this would happen. She had known her mother would try to make her feel guilty. She had known there would be backlash. But for the first time in years, Ella felt a sense of clarity, of freedom. The decision was hers. The life she was building was hers. And no one could take that from her. She put the phone down on the table and looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. It was quiet now, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, Ella allowed herself to breathe. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Ella's office, casting long shadows across the desk as she sat down with a fresh cup of coffee. The quiet hum of the HVAC system was a soothing backdrop, a reminder of how far she had come. Her business was thriving, the phone was ringing with service calls, and the emails piling up in her inbox were filled with client requests. It was the kind of busy she had always dreamed of. But more than that, it was the kind of busy she had earned. Ella leaned back in her chair and let out a slow, steady breath. For the first time in years, she didn't feel weighed down. The constant pull of her family's expectations, the endless need to prove herself, had all but vanished. She was finally living life on her own terms. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Genevieve, her longtime friend who had always been a source of support. She opened the text. "Hey, just checking in on you. How are things? I heard Caitlin moved back home. How are you holding up?" Ella sonrió suavemente, agradecida por la verificación de Genevieve. She quickly typed a response. "Things are good. Business is booming. I'm finally at peace. As for Caitlin, yeah, I heard. Honestly, I'm not looking back. I've made my decision." A few moments later, Genevieve's reply came through. "I totally get it. You did what was best for you. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. She'll figure things out, but at least now you're free." Ella leaned back again, reflecting on Genevieve's words. At least now you're free. It was a strange feeling. Freedom. She hadn't realized how much she had been shackled to her family's dysfunction until it was all gone. The constant guilt, the demands, the expectations that she'd always be there to pick up the pieces. It was like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. As she sat there, a sense of peace washed over her. She had made the hard decision, and she had stuck to it. She had chosen herself. It hadn't been easy, but now it felt necessary. Ella glanced down at her phone again, her gaze falling on the message from her mother. She had been expecting it, even if she hadn't wanted it. It was a simple message. "Merry Christmas, Ella. We need to talk." Ella stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Her heart didn't race. Her breath didn't catch in her throat. There was no rush of emotion this time, no twinge of guilt. Just a steady calm, a clarity that hadn't been there before. She had come too far to let her mother's manipulation pull her back into the cycle of sacrifice. She wasn't going to let it happen. Without hesitation, she tapped on the message, her thumb hovering for a moment before she hit delete. The message was gone, as if it had never existed. Ella cerró los ojos, su respiración firme. For the first time in years, she felt light. The tightness in her chest, the constant anxiety about what would happen next, had all dissolved. She wasn't responsible for Caitlin's choices anymore. She wasn't responsible for her family's problems. She was free. She stood up from her chair and walked over to the window, looking out over the city. The buildings of Seattle stood tall, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. The city seemed alive with possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Ella felt like she was part of that possibility, not just someone waiting for it to happen to her. The past few months had been hard. The phone calls, the guilt trips, the strain of trying to balance her own happiness with the constant pull of family expectations. It had taken everything out of her. But now, she saw it all clearly. It was a price she had to pay to reclaim her life. And now, she could breathe again. Ella returned to her desk and picked up her coffee. She took a long sip, savoring the warmth as it spread through her chest. There was no need to look back anymore. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. She could feel it deep inside. She was finally free. Even though Ella chose her own path, she never forgot the love and sacrifices her family had given her. But sometimes letting go is the only way to rediscover who we really are. In life, love isn't always returned in the way we hope, but what matters is that we choose to love ourselves. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts. It might be the inspiration someone needs to find balance in their own family relationships. And if you found meaning in this story, don't hesitate to follow for more stories like it.